Hello, everyone. It's Adrian here from Inted Consulting. And first of all, I want to apologize for the long delay since our last online episode or lesson or class or whatever we want to call it. I've been very busy recruiting teachers, and also I've had a business trip to Korea and China. So anyway, we still got a bit of time, and I'm sure you're all getting excited about heading abroad for your adventure. So I thought that today we should talk a little bit about technology because we've become so dependent on it in our regular lives, but also in the classroom setting. So this lesson is on technology tips. So first of all, the bad news, and you already may be aware of this, but China heavily censors the internet, and there's a long list of blocked websites. It's hard to always be up to date. It's possible that some of these could be unblocked tomorrow or temporarily, but you should prepare to not have access to anything related to Google, including Gmail, Google Drive, Google Documents, Google Play, etc., Wikipedia, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, Dropbox, Vimeo, and most or many foreign newspaper or news agencies. There are some exceptions, but that's the bad news. But we'll find out there are some ways around it, and you'll be able to survive. Don't worry. Really, we might wonder what's the big deal? Why is China blocking everything, and what are they blocking? Basically, they're blocking anything that they deem to be politically sensitive, including Chinese websites. It's not just foreign social media and websites. If it's politically sensitive, it has anything to do with the 3 T's. If you're not familiar with that term yet, 3 T's stands for Tiananmen Square, Tibet, and Taiwan. So these are highly sensitive topics in China. And at a later date, I'll make another video about considerations in the classroom and cultural and political sensitivities. But for now, we'll suffice it to say anything that's going to talk about those 3 things is out. If they're going to talk about Falun Gong, which is a spiritual group in China that it was banned about 15 years ago or so, they're going to be blocked. Anything that's deemed to be terrorist or promoting violence would be blocked, and all pornography is blocked as well. Sometimes China will temporarily block access to websites during sensitive times. So let's say the G20 meeting was in Hangzhou in late August and early September last year, so that would be a time to put a bit of a clamp down. A couple of weeks ago, around June 4th, which is the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre or incident, depending on your perspective, what you want to call it. Those types of things, we'll see a bit of a tightening around restrictions in China. So what is allowed? Well, first of all, any companies, IT companies that agreed to self-censor users in China are pretty much allowed to operate there, and they've signed agreements with China. So obviously Google didn't, but Microsoft and therefore its search engine Bing, Yahoo, those are 2 well-known large search engines that you can use in China. Again, if you're searching for politically sensitive things, it's not going to bring up the same results that you would get if you searched using the same search engine outside of China, but it is available. In terms of foreign social media that's not blocked, LinkedIn seems to be free. You may or may not use LinkedIn. It's social media for professionals. And Skype. Skype is free to use, so if you're in the routine of Skyping with family and friends back at home, you should be able to do that, no problem. Microsoft and Apple, of course, the 2 big heavyweights in the IT world, have both cut deals with China, and they operate successfully there. Now, how do you survive without your social media? If you're like many people, you're on Facebook, you're using Twitter, etc. So China has developed its own versions of most popular social media. So for Facebook, they've got a replica called RenRen that was quite popular a few years ago. These days is not very popular. So I wouldn't bother opening an account, and I don't even think you would find any use in it, but just so you know. They have a Chinese version of Twitter called the Weibo, or Sino Weibo. Again, I don't think it's something that you're likely going to want to get involved in, but you'll hear people talking about it. They have a replica of YouTube called Youku, which is a play on words, the U just from YouTube, and KUku is the loan word for the English word cool. So it's kind of a neat name. Basically, it's the video streaming service where you can upload videos and view them online. It sort of saved my daughter's life because my two children were both born in China, and around 2008, 2009, my daughter was 8 and 9 years old and very interested in what life in North America was like. And she was able to stream the popular TV shows for kids at the time, like Hannah Montana and iCarly and those kinds of things. So it works, and you can find some information that you might want up there. The next one was QQ, which was very popular a number of years ago. It's a messaging service where you can do individual chats or group chats. And it's also an email host. So you will find it's common for Chinese people to have their email hosted on QQ, where their email name will be their cell phone number, an 11-digit cell phone number. So one of the things you should be aware of over the summer, if it seems like you're not getting the communication by email that you were expecting from somebody in China, perhaps at the school, if they're not using a school-based email address, check your spam folder, your junk folder, because often the QQ emails go directly in there because your email host thinks, what is this? 56732945@qq.com doesn't sound like one of your normal contacts, so it just throws it into the junk folder. Anyway, and then the final and most important one is WeChat. WeChat is like WhatsApp or a Messenger and even more. And I'll say that WeChat is a must in China today. It's, you can leave not only text messages, but voice messages where you record up to 1 minute in length, and you can do a series of those recordings. And you can also do voice and video calls. So really, WeChat can replace a lot of your social media needs right now, or your communication needs. And there's no reason why your friends and family at home can't download WeChat on their phones and on their computers as well. So if you've got a cell phone right now that you're planning on taking with you to China, and I'll talk a little bit more about cell phones later, I strongly recommend that you download WeChat and get used to it, and maybe connect with some of the support staff at your particular school and get used to using it. WeChat can also be used for e-commerce, and on my most recent trip to China, I noticed a huge change in this switch from a cash-based society to now people are using their cell phones through the WeChat app to pay for things at stores and even restaurants, and to send money to each other. So it's really quite amazing. Then the second answer to the question, how do you survive without social media in China, is you start using a VPN. So if you don't know what a VPN is, it stands for a virtual private network. Basically what it's doing is it's tricking your internet connection into thinking you're somewhere else. So your VPN, you could choose the location. So you might be in Kaifeng, China, but your computer or your phone thinks you're in Toronto or in Madrid, Spain, or in New York, wherever. And what that does is it allows you to access blocked websites, so you can get all those things you want. So on my most recent trip to China, I just spent 2.5 weeks there. I had my cell phone from home, and I was actually on an international roaming plan. But I had a VPN loaded on my cell phone and on my laptop. So while I was connected to Wi-Fi wherever I was on my phone. I was able to access Facebook. I was giving regular updates on Facebook. I was able to access my email, which is hosted on Gmail, the email that I use. And when I was back in my hotel room on my laptop, I was able to, view things that I normally wouldn't be able to view. So it's essential. Every teacher, every foreigner in China right now will tell you it's essential to get a VPN. Don't get a cheap one or a free one. Get one that we know works. So when we've surveyed people in China, they're recommending, in particular, Astral, Strong, and ExpressVPN. I can't speak about about all of them. I've only used ExpressVPN. All I can say is I paid for it, it was worth it, and it works. You should note that the legality of VPNs in China is a bit of a gray area. I don't think there's a specific law outlawing them or banning them. But having said that, on school computers, you're not going to have VPNs loaded on them. So this is going to be something that you load yourself on your personal laptop or on your cell phone, so you have access. And then the one we can't stress enough is that even though, let's assume you are purchasing the VPN and you're going to have that, you really shouldn't count on it working, and therefore do not rely on any Google products. So that means if you use Google Docs and you use Google Drive to save your files, the first thing you've got to start doing, and you've got some time, start converting all your files to either Microsoft Office files like Word, PowerPoint, etc. Or you can use the Open Office files, which, if you're not familiar with that, those are the open source free versions that have replicated all the Microsoft Office suite. So just Google, while you still can, Google Open Office, and you'll be able to download that if for some reason you don't have access to, or you don't want to purchase Microsoft Office. And if you use Google Drive to store all your documents, I strongly recommend switching to Microsoft OneDrive. OneDrive is the same idea as Google Drive. It's a cloud-based storage system. I use it, so everything, I really have nothing saved on my laptop. Everything saves in the cloud. I can access it from my cell phone anywhere I am in the world too, and it's not blocked in China, so it's really handy. If you use Gmail, again, I strongly recommend that you open up a second email account, Outlook or Yahoo or whatever, and set up auto forwarding from your Gmail account, so that, or just switch, depending on how long you think you're going to be in China. It's just a real nuisance to obviously not to have access to your email. Again, on my most recent trip using a VPN, I did have access to my email, but there are times when the VPN may or may not work, or you don't have access to it. The easiest thing to do is just open up another email account on Outlook or somewhere. And if you're one of these teachers who's clued into Google Classroom, you better start looking for alternatives. There's nothing in particular that I would recommend. I would just say start searching and make sure you check to see that they are in fact accessible in China. If you search online, if you search for, is this website blocked in China, you can actually find a few websites where you plug in the URL, the web address, and it will do a quick search, a quick test, and it will tell you if it's accessible or not. So that's something you might want to do. In terms of the internet in general, you're going to have to be prepared for an internet that sort of crawls at a snail's pace compared to what you're used to. Personally, this is very interesting because when I moved to China to live, it was 1998, and I had only just had my first email account for probably less than a year at that point. Email was not really widespread like it is today. So we were on dial-up internet in China in those days, and we just, even though it was very slow, that's all we knew. So it's only since I've moved back to Canada and come accustomed to high-speed internet that I get frustrated when I go back to China. So just be prepared for it. Just in terms of some numbers, the average Canadian connectivity speed is about 18 megabytes per second, and in China the average is 9. So it's half the speed. Of course, it could be much slower at certain times, and generally speaking, foreign websites tend to run slower because they're getting through what's called the Great Firewall of China. Now, the school is going to help you set up Wi-Fi in your apartment. It's probably already set up, but in case you're a teacher who's been given a brand new apartment, they'll help you get it set up. And Wi-Fi is available in many places around China, in restaurants, cafes, airports, train stations, etc. So if you're just thinking about learning some Chinese, survival Chinese includes the term Wi-Fi Mima. So Mima means password. And if you're in a cafe or somewhere and you see on your phone, oh, there is a Wi-Fi connection, you can go up to a waiter or waitress and simply say to them, Wi-Fi Mima, and they'll know what you're talking about, and they'll often just grab your phone and help you out and punch the code in for you. So no problems there. Streaming video cannot be relied on in a classroom because of the slow internet speed. That doesn't mean it's not possible, and perhaps in your school it will be possible, but it's a very good practice for teachers to identify any videos that you think you might want to use and download them at home or in the office at work, in the school, and then save them and just play them from the saved recording. If you expect that you're just going to be able to go online and stream a video, you're setting yourself up for failure. So that's a key point I wanted to get across. And also, if you're Skyping or using the WeChat video call, of course, video is possible. It often works, and I interview people and communicate with people with the principals of the schools by Skype and by WeChat video all the time. But there are many times where the connection is poor and we decide to turn off the video and just go with the voice. So just be prepared for that. Many people are wondering, what about mobile phones? So first of all, China is a fantastic country for mobile phone coverage. You pretty much have to be in a long tunnel on the train or on a freeway for you to not have mobile service. It's not like in Canada where, I live in Kamloops, BC. If I drive 10 minutes out of town, I don't have cell service. In China, you have cell service everywhere. So that's really wonderful. And the data and talk time is very, very affordable. Basically, you buy a SIM card for about $15, and then it's pay as you go, and it's very, very affordable. Now, the big question that people ask is, should you bring your phone from home or should you buy one in China? So I think the important question is, first of all, do you have a phone? And if you have a phone now, is it paid off? Are you on a 2, or are you still stuck on one of the old 3-year plans in Canada where you're making monthly payments? If you're making monthly payments and you still have a year to go, my recommendation would be to see if you could find someone else to take over your plan and leave that phone here, unless you want to choose to just pay it all off right now. If your phone is paid off, the key thing here is you're going to have to get it unlocked before you take it with you to China. All of the cell phone providers in Canada have locked your phone. So, for example, if you're with Rogers, you can't just walk down to Bell and start using their service. You have to get Rogers to unlock your phone. The CRTC in Canada has just deemed this to be, an unethical practice, and in the future they won't be allowed to do that. But for now, if you're a Canadian, most of your phones are locked. You've got to go to get them unlocked. Until the new regulations are enacted, it might cost you $30 or something like that to do so. Once you get to China, you can just buy a new SIM card and have it put in, and you're good to go. If you're looking at buying a phone in China, of course, there's a huge array. You can get all the latest phones there. The one thing to consider is most people in Canada aren't buying their phones outright. They're paying on a plan over 2 years. In China, that's not really available. So you're going to be looking at, if you want a high-end phone, you're going to be looking at paying a similar price to what you're paying in Canada, or even more for something like the latest iPhone or latest Samsung, although you won't be paying the same amount of tax, but you would be having to pay that several $100s up front. But generally speaking, Chinese-made phones are very affordable, and there's also a massive secondhand phone market. So if you're looking to if you're saying, I don't have a phone right now, I'll get one when I'm there. Of course, you can get a half decent little smartphone for a very affordable price. But one thing to consider is things like Google Play or some apps that might be blocked in China. You wouldn't be able to download them there. So those are the kinds of things you want to download before you go over. Other technology tips. A lot of these tips have come from teachers who are teaching in China who I recently surveyed. And I'd never heard of, I had actually never thought of this myself because I lived in China a long time. And when I first went over there, we used to carry around little phrase books, paper, real books. And then I got to the point where I'm comfortable in Mandarin, so I don't need it. But from the perspective of a new teacher going over, I think this is great advice that you could download a Chinese translation app for your phone. And one particular app that a teacher recommended is called Pleco. Again, I haven't used it, but this is a recommendation from a Canadian teacher in China. Any tech gadgets that you're going to need can be bought in China. So I wouldn't worry about buying things like, a dongle, the little connection for your laptop, or to connect a laptop to a projector or things like that. Those can all be purchased there. Every Chinese city has an electronics market. You find a taxi and you ask for the Dianzichang, which literally means electronics market. And you will find that these are massive places with full of stalls, all specializing in different types of electronics, everything from cell phones to laptops to little connectors. And generally speaking, although the vendors probably won't speak English, there will be key terminology or vocabulary that you can use. For example, USB is universal. HDMI, if you're looking for an HDMI connection, the mini HDMI, that all would be understood. So I wouldn't worry too much about bringing things like that from home. You'll be able to find them there in China. And some people have even suggested a lot of those little accessories tend to work better in China if you purchase them in China. In terms of computers, so most schools are going to provide a few desktop computers for teachers to use in the teacher's office space, but they're not going to provide laptops, generally speaking. So you're going to want your own. I mean, there's not that many teachers these days who are planning lessons and teaching without their own laptop. So then again, we have this question, do you buy at home or do you buy in China? One thing to consider is when you buy your computer at home, you're going to get an English operating system, which is if you buy a laptop in China, it may come with a Chinese operating system. So it'll still be Windows, for example, but it's it's Chinese version of Windows 10. You can get an English version, but sometimes they might not be a legitimate version. It might be a pirated copy, and there could be issues there. So for that reason, it may just be easier to bring your laptop from home. The one piece of technology that I think it is worth bringing with you is an electrical adapter. Now, laptops are fine anywhere in the world in terms of the voltage, whether it's 110 or 220 or 240. That's not the issue. But the actual electrical plug doesn't fit into the wall socket in China. So I recently just went on Amazon and I bought a little adapter that's about that big, and it's got little bits that flip out and is good in any country. You're going to want that just for your first couple of days when you get there. Once you get there, you could go and buy a new, the actual end piece of your electrical plug-in that goes into the power bar and then into the wall. You could go and buy one that matches the Chinese wall sockets for probably $15 or something like that. That wouldn't be expensive. But I would recommend bringing an adapter. Also, you're probably going to be traveling on some of your vacations. And if you went, for example, to Korea, they use a totally different electrical outlet system than China uses and than we use in North America. They use the one similar to European mainland. Here's some more tips from teachers. These are their words, not mine. Again, I surveyed some teachers on a Facebook page for BC Offshore Schools. And I asked those who were teaching in China, just to give some advice to new teachers. And these are some of the things they said. So you can see the first person made a comment about choosing to get an iPad as a tablet because they could access the Canadian iTunes stores directly, and that some other app stores are geo-locked, meaning you could only use the Chinese site, which might limit certain apps you want to download. I haven't had any experience with that, but it seemed like a good tip to pass on. Another teacher said the expectation for classroom tech is to expect nothing and then to create a unified front with the other teachers and get whatever is needed. I think that's great advice. Really, good teaching at its core requires a teacher and some pupils, and you could be under a tree, right, in a field. You don't need to have technology, so plan to have nothing, but do what you can to enable technology when you can. And then the great advice, the third piece here, is always have a backup plan. Technology in China is unreliable. You may test something in the morning, and by the afternoon, the internet or the projector or the program or the classroom computer or whatever it is will not be working. Plan to use it, but don't rely completely on it. And I could add on to that you should even expect a couple of days a year for the power to go out. And it could be a planned outage where somebody tells you. Could be a planned outage where somebody forgot to tell you, or it just could be the power goes out. And even though China is an absolutely booming economy, and you'll be very stunned by some of the high technology and the advancements there that are way beyond what we've got in Canada at the moment, we have to keep in mind that in many ways it is still a developing country. And the incredible speed of development means that the infrastructure is sometimes not there. So power goes out, water could go out at the school even for a day or so, or in your apartment. So you have to be prepared for that. I would say a couple of times a year. One teacher, a teaching couple, let me know that they purchased a QME, which is a miniature projector themselves, because they said that some classrooms don't have reliable projectors. So they thought it was worth it to get their own. And then if there's a projector in the classroom, great. But if it's not working that day, you pull out your own. And then this is not really related to the classroom experience, but a teacher also recommended that you purchase a Kindle or a tablet or an e-reader because it's very difficult to find English novels. So if you're somebody who likes to read novels or nonfiction for fun, and you don't just want to read your textbooks, then that's excellent advice. And then in terms of technology outside of the classroom and in your daily life, any electronic appliances for your apartment can be bought in China. And I wouldn't recommend bringing things from Canada, like don't bring your hairdryer. Because you got to worry about, getting a transformer to change from 110 volts to 220. You'll need adapters, and really all of these appliances are available unless you have something so specialized. Like if you had a need for a popcorn popper or something, ridiculously specialized like that. But hair dryers, blenders, coffee grinders, coffee percolators, an electric fan for the summer if you like to have a fan when you're sleeping, things like that. Those are all available there. They're very cheap. Toaster ovens, etc., microwaves, they're all very cheap. So don't bother filling up your suitcase with things like that. And that's basically it. That's the rundown on technology. I wanted to make sure you heard all that before you came over. Feel free to ask any questions on the ChalkUp site, and I will endeavor to get another video and lesson out to you as soon as possible. Thanks, everyone.